When it comes to your digital footprint, there is no such thing as too much information.
They know so much about us, they kind of know what will trigger us.
How to protect your privacy online is coming up on WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on today's show, a Bloomington shelter offers a new way to help people live on their own.
They gave me a way to see hope and a better future.
A Unit 5 teacher is honored for leading the way for her students learning STEM.
Many of them will take careers or jobs that don't exist right now. That's how fast things are changing.
And a Bloomington nonprofit tries to reduce the stigma around eating disorders. Those stories follow a Bloomington Normal News update just ahead. This is Sound Ideas on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington Normal Audiology. Hear My Story continues with local patient Paul Brandt.
Honestly, I appreciate working with BNA. I would just say that I appreciate all the tough times with me, patience and persistence with me.
Paul's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Privacy and cybersecurity experts are telling Bloomington Normal residents they need to worry more about containing their information. WGLT's Charlie Schlenker reports on speeches to the Twin Cities chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union.
The old saying about the internet goes, if you are not paying for it, you are not the audience, you are the product. And you're the product sometimes even when you do pay, because companies will sell your data. Your computer collects information about you through cookies when you visit websites and use social media. Your phone keeps location data and internet use data when you are not on Wi-Fi. Your apps collect information when you shop at the grocery store. Your smart machines like Nest devices, smart speakers, even washing machines also harvest your daily habits and preferences. You may not just be watching TV, your TV could be watching you. Companies buy and sell this information to flesh out and better sell their goods and services and others. Stephen Reagan is the policy and advocacy strategist on privacy technology and surveillance for the ACLU of Illinois. He says it's not just commercial habits and taste information at risk. Reagan says even political actors could tailor approaches that would cause you to believe something that might not be true.
The problem that they can kind of target all of this information is because they know so much about us, they kind of know what will trigger us.
You'd think the Constitution would protect from some of this. Not so. And even long-hallowed constitutional protections such as unreasonable search and seizure could be at risk. Dmitry Zhdanov directs the Center for Cybersecurity Research and Education at Illinois State University.
If someone in the government agency wants to eavesdrop on you, they need to get a search warrant, right? But if they go to data aggregator and buy all the same data, no search warrant needed, right? This makes me wondering, right? So did we just, found a way to hack the Constitution?
The same kind of thing is true for medical data. The ACLU's Stephen Reagan says medical providers are governed by strict federal privacy law, but things like fitness apps aren't, and they can collect some medical information and sell it onward, providing companies a far more detailed picture of your health and habits than you might want them to have. Information is important. Before and during the Second World War, for instance, the ACLU's Stephen Reagan says information about individuals led to state-sponsored violence. Only 14 states now have information privacy laws, and Reagan says those tend not to be comprehensive.
And this is a really common theme, that technology outpaces the law, and the law is always struggling to keep up.
And Reagan and Zhdanov say there's not a lot individual consumers can do. Disallowing cookies can make some websites non-functional. You might not want to use certain apps that sell your information if you know about it. Notices about vending typically are tucked away into those end-user and licensing agreements no one reads. It's hard to avoid. Zhdanov says government has even backed off some things. Around 2018, Congress rolled back consumer protection, and companies sent out a blizzard of notices they changed their terms of use agreements. Zhdanov says the resolution of complaints is no longer in the courts, it's in arbitration. To use a service or app, you give up your right to sue.
And the thing that bugs me personally about arbitration as opposed to open court, arbitration records are sealed. So the big company may have 50,000 clients that they're abusing in the same way. And if you had a class action, that might be a countermeasure, but they cannot find out about each other because arbitration.
Again, just 14 states protect personal data privacy in some fashion. Illinois doesn't have a comprehensive privacy law, but Reagan says the Biometric Information Privacy Act of 2008 does cover your fingerprints, your voice, your facial geometry, and your hand geometry, unless you give your prior consent in ticking the box on one of those user agreements. Illinois does allow a right of private action, a lawsuit, if companies misuse personal data or collect it without authorization. But Reagan says that doesn't cover everywhere.
If there are lax privacy laws in another state and you're traveling there, those protections don't travel with you.
And information scavenger companies are already moving to do a workaround. California has perhaps the most robust privacy law in the nation. Now, some companies are including a provision in their user agreements that you specifically agree to waive California protections if you use their app. Reagan says the ACLU is working on a broader Health Privacy Act for Illinois this year. Whether it will pass is not certain. Dmitry Zhdanov says Europe and the U.S. tend to look at things very differently. Not only does Europe do an opt-in for privacy and the U.S. an opt-out, but the size of the penalties tends to be vastly different.
If American courts imposes $50,000 fine on a massive company like Big Five in tech, it's nothing for them. It's cost of doing business. But in Europe, they impose fine of up to quarter of annual worldwide revenues, I believe, right? So if that is the fine, then the companies will think twice whether they want to exploit information or not.
Even if someday there is an overarching federal privacy law, Reagan says it may just be words on a paper.
We could have all the privacy laws in the world again, and then if we don't have effective enforcement, if we don't speak in those terms of capital, then companies are going to continue to violate our privacy and kind of operate unimpeded.
Reagan and Zhdanov say there is a consequence to the loss of personal information that can be broader even than a danger of tyranny, personal manipulation, or commercial exploitation. They say for humans to be truly creative and express themselves, they need to be able to avoid embarrassment or fear. If you don't control your own identity, you can't do that. I'm Charlie Schlenker.
Bloomington Normal has a lot of aging infrastructure, including lead water pipes. Tomorrow on Sound Ideas, hear how the Twin Cities are trying to keep that lead out of drinking water. This is Sound Ideas on WGLT. For people with prior evictions and other blemishes from their past, finding housing can be a nightmare. For some, it's how they wind up experiencing homelessness. A new program from a Bloomington-based shelter looks to give people a second chance, as you'll hear from WGLT's Melissa Ellen. Home Sweet Home Ministries says it is still looking for landlords to work with its master leasing program.
Shelley Hart experienced homelessness on and off for about 2 years.
I went through a rough time, and I lost my job, and I got behind on rent, and I got evicted from my place.
Then she found herself at Home Sweet Home Ministries shelter in Bloomington. It's there she got a new lease, both on a rental unit and to some extent on life.
They gave me a way to see hope and a better future, that it could be good again, and that I could be a functional adult and happy, and that I deserved that happiness.
Hart is one of 3 people to join Home Sweet Home's master leasing program. It allows tenants to sublease through an organization that is often willing to be more flexible about who they let into their units. CEO Matt Burgess says the shelter is giving people who can afford to rent but have some insurmountable barrier a shot. Barriers can be anything from poor credit to felony conviction. In Hart's case, a prior eviction. Burgess says for people like Hart, Home Sweet Home looks beyond these blemishes for prospective renters they know and trust.
This one thing should not be what's in their way of getting housed.
The shelter is currently finding participants like Hart through its resident pool. Community Outreach Director Steve Tassio says they hope to start coordinating with other service providers soon. They're looking forward to an update of the homeless management information system that area service providers share. This way, the shelter can effectively connect with the clients most in need. Funding is coming through grants and donations. That's how the organization largely operates already. Home Sweet Home CEO Matt Burgess says the housing crisis has also led to this program.
In a looser housing market, a landlord is going to be more willing to accept a lower credit score, or, maybe take an applicant that doesn't look as great on paper. But because we are so tight now, landlords don't have to do that. They've got 10 applicants for an apartment.
Given the nature of master leasing, Home Sweet Home is being affected by the crisis itself. It's currently working with a few area landlords who are willing to let the organization sublease, but finding more can be an issue. The nonprofit must compete with everyone else. Right now, Home Sweet Home is building relationships with landlords and finding more to work with the shelter down the line. Burgess says it will likely take years before they develop a robust portfolio of units to master lease. He adds that the shelter is still determining whether the program can work. This is the first time it's done something like this.
It's a risk for us organizationally to take this step. It puts our name on the line. It puts our financial resources on the line indefinitely.
The shelter's housing navigator, Jacob Phillips, says there's also going to need to be some flexibility in the program. Master leasing is meant to get people back on their feet and ready to rent solo. That means variable lease lengths.
Each individual client is so different, and their long-term trajectory is so different. And so we want to be able to, look at it that very open-handed.
For example, Burgess says there's one person Home Sweet Home is working with who thinks he'll only need a half year or so to get back on his feet. He doesn't want to get locked into a 1-year lease because that would mean time away from his son, who he's trying to get back to. If there was a unit available, Burgess says Home Sweet Home could offer him a 6-month lease. And if he's ready to move out before then, that's fine too.
Because we'll always have a next person to bring in to serve in that unit.
Home Sweet Home has 3 1-year leases with landlords. Housing navigator Jacob Phillips says he would like to see that change in the future. He notes there are benefits of extending leases to 2 or 3 years, so the shelter can better meet client needs. Community Outreach Director Steve Tassio says the shelter has a lot of ideas about how master leasing can turn into permanent housing for participants. After all, permanent, stable shelter is the ultimate goal for all Home Sweet Home residents. Tassio says it would be ideal for Home Sweet Home clients to take over the leases from their landlords directly, but that would leave Home Sweet Home in a lurch, trying to find another unit to master lease.
We're still feeling this out, seeing what the benefits are, especially to the landlords, but we want the clients to have the most dignified experiences possible as quickly as possible.
Home Sweet Home staff are also trying to figure out how to help clients build better credit. With the current arrangement, Tassio says that's not always happening, since landlords would have to report on behalf of Home Sweet Home clients.
We know that to be an issue, and therefore we try to work through other ways to build credit.
Home Sweet Home staff are going to continue working with clients throughout their time master leasing. Housing navigator Jacob Phillips or someone else will meet with each client regularly to make sure they're adjusting to life alone, able to meet rent payments, and are working toward being successful on their own. Master lease participant Shelley Hart says this has been one of the best things to happen to her recently. She adds that Home Sweet Home has made a huge difference in her outcome.
And I was terrified when I moved here. And I mean, I get emotional because they literally changed my life.
Phillips has been working with Hart to meet her goals. She says her next step is to get a job, but she's also excited for the little things, like being able to have people over to her new space. She doesn't want to fall back into depression either, but with the shelter's resources, she's not too concerned about the future. I'm Melissa Ellen.
Stories and conversations around Bloomington, Normal, and McLean County. This is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. Every so often on WGLT, we'll bring you the story of an unsung community servant who's making Bloomington Normal a better place to be. It's a series we call More of That, Please. This week, WGLT's Lauren Warnicki stopped by Normal West High School, where one teacher got a big surprise.
April Sherman was named Computer Science Teacher of the Year by Project Lead the Way. That's a national network supporting STEM educators. PLTW staff were on hand to present the award to Sherman in her classroom, followed by a victory lap throughout the entire school. lined the hallways of Normal West, cheering Ms. Sherman on as her coding students trailed behind her, ringing cowbells. Sherman says she was especially touched by student testimonials offered during the awards presentation.
Sometimes teaching and coaching are thankless professions, and so when we can actually hear from students about the impact we've made, it means a lot.
Sherman remembers the moment AOL Messenger went live, making it possible to talk to her friends online. She was 14.
Now we have students who have no idea what not having GPS or not having a cell phone is like.
Now the teenagers in Sherman's classes are learning coding and AI. In addition to teaching math and computer science, Sherman leads an extracurricular coding club for girls and young women. She also runs a Cyber Patriot team for students aspiring to careers in cybersecurity.
Many of them will take careers or jobs that don't exist right now. That's how fast things are changing.
Here's Project Lead the Way CEO David Demmett.
Today, every company, every community is a tech company and potentially a tech community. So we're looking at ways that we can prepare and reimagine the experience for students.
Demmett says Sherman's work has been exemplary, both in Normal and as a PLTW master teacher.
Students don't just want to sit in a classroom and be talked to. And what's wonderful about April's classroom and other Project Lead the Way classrooms is that students are in charge of their learning.
Normal West Principal Angie Cadron and special guests from State Farm's STEM internship program joined the Project Lead the Way staff, stopping by Sherman's classroom before sending her on that victory lap through the hallways. Looking back on her career, Sherman says the curriculum is not the only thing that's changed.
9 years ago, when I started teaching computer science, I had one girl in my AP computer science class. If you look at this class, it's over half girls.
But this is just one on a rather long list of awards for Sherman, including an Outstanding Teachers Award from Women in STEM in 2016. She was recognized from Disney's 100 Teachers Initiative, honoring imaginative educators. That included a trip to Disneyland last year. And let's not leave out 8 regional championships as Normal West's varsity softball coach, a team that sent 14 players to Division I collegiate programs over the years. Still, Sherman says this award from a national organization like Project Lead the Way is pretty special.
When I first heard about this company, I knew we had to get this in Unit 5, and I just think they see the bigger picture with STEM education, and so it just means a lot coming from such a big organization to be the one teacher that is recognized this year.
I'm Lauren Warnicki.
WGLT wants to hear your suggestions for heartwarming stories of good stuff happening in your community. Contact us through our website, social media pages, or by emailing us at news@wglt.org. On our final story on Sound Ideas today, you will learn, if you didn't know, eating disorders are a mental illness, even if they're not always thought of it that way. Hillary Pasha is an eating disorder recovery coach. She opened a nonprofit in Bloomington called One Hope Project to help those with eating disorders 4 years ago this week, right before the pandemic hit. And during this time of growing mental health concerns, more and more people are turning to her for help. Pasha says the pandemic has had a significant impact on individuals' mental health. She says demand has grown so much, her office now has a waiting list for individual counseling services. In this edition of Sound Health, Pasha tells WGLT student reporter Megan Spurline the driving force behind the nonprofit was both professional and personal.
I personally have struggled with an eating disorder from a very young age, off and on over the years, and it really kind of got hit a peak, if you will, right after having my son, who's now 13. So it's been a while, and that was when I was really like, I need my own help, and so I went on a journey to get help, and there really was nothing in the area to help. I'm an advocate at heart, and I was able to persevere, but I just remember thinking nobody should have to work this hard to get the help that they need and deserve. And then professionally, because I've been in this community all my life, and my background is nonprofits, and no matter what population of folks that I was working with at a nonprofit, what stood out to me was there was always clients who would say that they struggled with an eating disorder or body image issues or disordered eating. And so that kind of stood out to me too. So I guess, in 2020 was when I decided enough's enough, and I wanted to fill a need and a void that was in our community. We have a lot of great services, but eating disorders is not one of them.
Are there any particular eating disorders or treatments that you guys focus on?
Eating disorders and where we're kind of at as a culture are kind of behind the times in the sense of, I always equate it to, because I have a background in working in domestic violence and sexual assault, and it reminds me of eating disorders is kind of where domestic violence, sexual assault was like 20 years ago. So not a lot of people, like maybe, yes, people have heard of it. They've heard of maybe anorexia or bulimia, maybe binge eating, but they know very little. And there's a lot of stigma around it. And so I think a lot of people think, oh, it's choice, or is it really that big of a problem? And so I think that that is part of it. And so part of what we do at One Hope Project is bringing the education awareness, but our focus isn't on any particular eating disorder. In fact, somebody doesn't have to have an eating disorder diagnosis to come and get services. If they simply have, maybe an unhealthy relationship with food, or struggle with body image, some things that maybe put them at risk for developing an eating disorder, then we work with those clients as well.
And what would you say is like the mission of One Hope Project, or like what kind of messages are you hoping to send to the Bloomington Normal community?
Yes. So obviously we do have our mission to help people on their journey to recovery, but I think really some of the takeaways that I really want to our community to know and get behind is really recognizing that eating disorders are a mental illness. So a lot of times people think it's a choice, or they have a lot of different misconceptions about eating disorders and what they are, but it is a mental illness. And it's time we kind of, I think, really realize that, because we have a lot of great services in our community for mental health. So kind of letting, eating disorders have a seat at the proverbial table. So, pun intended or not intended, I'm not sure, but, it's time for eating disorders to have a seat at the table when we're talking about mental health. And so that it is a problem and it does exist in our community, even though people haven't maybe seen it as much. And that's because there hasn't been a One Hope Project. And so not only is it a mental health issue, but it actually has the highest mortality rate than any other mental illness, yet it's the most underfunded. And so we're kind of in an uphill battle. There's a lot of people coming in our doors now.
That was Hillary Pasha with the One Hope Project in Bloomington, speaking with WGLT student reporter Megan Spurline. One Hope has hosted 2 events this week to mark Eating Disorders Week. One was a virtual workshop on stigma around eating disorders and diet culture. The other was a yoga class on body gratitude.
Support for WGLT health coverage comes from Carle Health. You can count on Carle as your partner in healthcare. Information at carle.org.
And that's Sound Ideas today, WGLT's news magazine, made possible in part by Bloomington Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton, story help from WGLT's Charlie Schlenker, Melissa Ellen, Lauren Warnicki, and student reporter Megan Spurline. Ryan Toohey edits Sound Ideas. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.